Welcome everybody to Dinner Chat, Midwest Survivors. So, have you ever watched someone rewrite a story that you actually lived through and suddenly they're the victim? They're the problem? You know, your silence becomes punishment. Your decision to walk away becomes abandonment. Your refusal to argue becomes proof that you don't care. And after everything that happened, you find yourself thinking, how did I become the villain in this story, where I was simply trying to protect myself? Sometimes people need you to be the villain because if you're not, they need to examine themselves and maybe rectify the fact that they are the problem. So here's tonight's dinner chat. So grab your dinner, grab your coffee, grab your sweet tea. Let's talk about it. Why some people need you to be the villain. So every conflict has different perspectives. And just because somebody sees you as the villain doesn't automatically mean that they are manipulating you. Two people can experience the exact same thing. That's why witness testimony in court cases can be so unreliable, because one person sees it one way, another person sees it another way, another person sees it in an entirely different way. And each one generally believes that they are right. And you may genuinely be right, and they may genuinely believe that you hurt them. But healthy maturity requires asking this: is there something that I need to take responsibility for? And speaking honestly, as a person that's going through life and transitioning things and has taken on the role of the villain, there's a difference between somebody having a different perspective and somebody completely rewriting events, or people that aren't even connected to the situation, living in entirely different states, who maybe have seen you a couple of times a year, if that, forming perceptions based on what they're being told, based on text messages, based on emails, based on phone calls, when they aren't even physically connected to the situation. And that's the pattern we're talking about tonight. If you're the villain, they don't have to examine themselves. Imagine somebody hurts you repeatedly. Eventually, you establish a boundary. Instead of asking, what did I do to cause this person to reach this point? They automatically turn it around and say, look at what they are doing to me. What did I do to cause this person to reach this point? You know, they always say, anybody that wants to portray somebody as a villain will always flip the narratives around. It'll go from what did I do to cause them to reach this point to look at what they're doing to me. Now the conversation isn't about their behavior or their lack of remorse or their lack of empathy or their involvement in the situation. The conversation, it's about your response to their behavior. Your boundary becomes the headline. The choice that you made to walk away from an unhealthy situation becomes the topic of discussion. And that is convenient, because if you're the villain, they don't have to ask themselves uncomfortable questions. Your reaction becomes the entire story. This happens consistently in unhealthy conflict. Somebody pushes, somebody criticizes, somebody accuses, somebody provokes, somebody dismisses, and eventually you react. Maybe you become angry. Maybe you raise your voice. Maybe you walk away. Suddenly, it becomes, see, look how they behave. Look at what they did. Look at their choices. Look at how they are. I knew how they were going to act from the very beginning. Now your reaction becomes the entire story. That doesn't mean that we were never responsible for our actions. We absolutely are. If you responded badly, own that part. There are things that over the course of a person's life that they could have done better at. However, they did the best they could with the options that were in front of them at the time. And nobody gets it right, nobody does it perfectly. But your reaction doesn't automatically erase everything that happened before it. So there's always reasons why people do what they do leading up to something. Healthy accountability examines the whole interaction. Boundaries can make you look mean to people who have benefited from having no boundaries. For years, maybe you said yes. You answered every phone call. You did everything you could. You loaned money. You tolerated criticism and complaining. You kept explaining yourself. And then one day you finally had enough and said, this stops right now. I'm done. I'm finished. It's over. Let's move on. And let's break away. Suddenly you've changed. Suddenly you're selfish. Suddenly you're the villain. Suddenly you don't care about anybody anymore. And maybe you did change. Maybe you stopped allowing people to walk all over you. Maybe you stopped allowing people to force their perceptions on you in spite of you having a mind, you having ideas and dreams and hopes, and letting people criticize you and destroy you for having those dreams. Maybe you stopped saying, you know what, I'm not just going to get by and do status quo anymore. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to make it and be successful. A boundary can look very cruel and look like an incredibly high, thick wall to someone who was comfortable with having complete 100% access to you and treating you like a doormat and kicking you like a dog. People often tell the version of the story that protects their identity and hides their role in the pain. Many people want to believe that they are good people, and that is completely normal. Being good, being healthy, being normal is what we should all strive to try to be. But accountability requires sometimes admitting, you know what, I make mistakes. I do things wrong. I say the wrong thing. I think the wrong things. I have the wrong processes. Admitting that you're wrong, or admitting mistakes, or admitting that you hurt somebody, that is very uncomfortable. So instead, people may unconsciously create explanations that preserve their self-image. I didn't control them, they were secretive. I wasn't disrespectful, they were too sensitive. I didn't push them away, they abandoned me. Some people just cannot handle rejection of any kind. I know of many people that are still writhing and digging up and vomiting the fact that somebody rejected them, somebody hurt them, somebody mistreated them, somebody took things from them, somebody stole from them, somebody mistreated them when it was 20, 30, 40, even 50 years ago, and they just live in it constantly, like a constant cycle. Now, they don't have to see themselves as someone who contributed to the breakdown, because their side of the story is what protects their identity and their role in what could be a two-sided conflict. Sometimes they just need an audience. I know of one person that constantly, anytime somebody is talking about a pain or an issue in their life, they immediately overload the conversation and make it all about them and their pain and their hurt and their sicknesses and their problems. And they just vomit stuff over and over and over again, to the point that people reject that person, and then that person is surprised why they have no friends and why people don't want to be around them. Well, do the math. Whenever you make everything all about your life and your hurts and your pains and everything, and try to not, and you're not empathetic to your fellow human beings and everybody around you, nobody wants to be around that. I care about, I just started a new job this week, and I've been spending time getting to know people and talking to people, because people are interesting and people are fascinating and people have stories to tell. And you will never hear a person's story whenever you are constantly talking about yourself. You have to open these up. There's an old Spanish saying that says we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should listen twice as much as we speak. And that is very true. So friends, people need an audience, and this is difficult, especially when private conflict blows up, goes viral, and gets publicized. Friends, family members, co-workers, church members, Facebook, Instagram, social media. Suddenly people who are living states away, who weren't present, who aren't present, who have no firsthand experience, who have never walked in the person's shoes and lived in their skin, have opinions about what happened, and I know of several people personally that form opinions about other people even though they maybe see them once or twice a year. The only way they communicate with them is social media, phone calls, and text messages. They don't spend a great deal of time with them and around them, and yet they form opinions based on those phone calls, those text messages, those emails, whenever they are not directly connected to what's going on, with no idea of the full story. They're just getting little snippets by one side or the other. That is not, you may feel an overwhelming need to defend yourself, but here's the reality. Against that, you can't defend because they have already formed their opinion and verdict on you. You may want to say that's not what's happened. So you start explaining, you start posting, you start calling people, you start sending screenshots. You try to correct every rumor. Really, and I warn you, and please be very, very careful. You can spend your entire life trying to manage everybody else's perception of you, when in reality, the only perception that you need to worry about is your own perception of yourself. Sometimes protecting your peace means accepting that some people may believe a version of you that is false, that isn't accurate, and that is completely bunk. You don't have to attend every trial where you're the defendant. Some people will constantly put you on trial. Explain yourself, defend yourself, prove yourself, answer my questions, then another, and eventually you have to ask, who appointed this person judge, jury, and executioner over my entire life? The reality is, nobody. There are situations where clarification is appropriate and necessary, unfortunately. However, there are situations where you have already explained enough, or you don't have to explain at all. You don't have to spend hours, days, months, and years and weeks defending yourself against people committed to misunderstanding you, denigrating you, running you through the mud, and just don't care about you. Family systems sometimes need a villain, and this is true in dysfunctional families where there's narcissism, gaslighting, manipulation, and abuse. Some families have designated a whipping child or a problem person or a scapegoat or a black sheep or whatever name you want to use. There's the rebellious child, the difficult sibling, the dramatic one, the middle child, the one who always causes trouble. And sometimes that person is simply the one willing to question reality, question the family system, and question things that they see as unhealthy and not appropriate. They say, this is not healthy. This is not right. There are some changes that need to happen. Why does it have to always be your way? And suddenly everybody focuses on how they said it, or a face they made, or they try to get into their brain and say, I know what you're thinking. Things like that. Families sometimes maintain stability by causing instability and assigning dysfunction to one person. And if that person is the problem, nobody has to examine the larger system. They're the poster person of that family of all of its problems. Leaving will make you the villain, and I can honestly say leaving an unhealthy situation like I have has definitely made me the villain, and I am perfectly acceptable with that. Some people tolerate unhealthy situations for years. In my case, it was well over 10 years of yelling, screaming, manipulation, gaslighting, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, financial abuse, being told that I wasn't going to do this and I wasn't going to do that, being told that I couldn't clean good enough, that I couldn't work hard enough, that whenever I did work hard enough, I was never home, and on and on and on. That was just a little snippet of the things that I tolerated. And you can only go so far. You can only put up with that for so long. And eventually you will break. And then they finally decide to leave. And everybody always asks. They send the text messages, the Facebook messages, the phone calls. How could you just walk away? How could you just do this? And on and on and on. But few people asked, well, they never ask the why. They never ask what caused this to happen. What has been going on that caused you to feel this way? You know, people see what the dramatic exit. They see the leap from the stage or the busting through the wall. You know, they see the departure. They don't always see the things that happened before it. They see the massive explosion, but they never see the trail of gasoline in the thrown match or the lit gunpowder. You know, they don't see the things that led up to that moment. The 10 years, the 12 years, the 20 years, the 30 years, the 40 years of pain and abuse that so many people face, and they face silently and quietly until they can take no more. You know, the human body, the human brain has limits and tolerances that whenever you push something to the brink, that one of two things is going to happen. It's either going to break, it's going to shatter, it's going to explode. There's going to be some kind of catastrophe that happens whenever you push a person or a piece of machinery or something to the maximum limits and beyond, and you do it consistently, day after day, month after month, year after year. Eventually something will break. You know, and that is why a final decision is always visible. You know, the 1,000 moments that led up to up to this moment weren't visible and aren't visible to people. But the one moment where the person hits the eject button or bails out or walks out, that moment is always visible to everybody, and everybody always focuses on that, not on everything that preceded it. So saying no can make you the villain. Maybe somebody needs money. You say no. Maybe somebody wants your time. You say, I'm sorry, I don't have any time to give you, I'm unavailable. You don't care. You don't care about me, you don't care about the family, you don't care about anything but yourself. You hear that one. Sometimes people just want information about your personal life. You can decline. One of my favorite lines, and the gangster Nicky Scarfo used this line more times than not, and he did it better than Anthony Fauci, for my opinion. I invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution and decline to answer the question. And when they press you again, you just simply smile and say, same answer. Suddenly you decline. You're hiding something. You know, you just don't want us to know anything. That's why boundaries require confidence, transparency, honesty, and strength. Because doing what is healthy, you're not going to receive applause for it. Not everybody's going to respect it, admire it, or understand it. And there's going to be a lot of times you're going to disappoint people and you're going to make people unhappy because you are protecting yourself and getting away from the unhealthy situation that they are involved in. You know, you can be the villain in someone's story and still examine yourself. And this is very important, and there's balance to this. So don't be so convinced that everybody else is wrong that you stop practicing accountability, responsibility, and transparency for yourself. Start asking yourself important questions like this. Do I communicate respectfully? Have I lied? Did I manipulate? Did I intentionally hurt someone? Could I have handled something better? The last one, very importantly, we can all do things better. We can all learn to be better. If you were wrong, admit it, own it, apologize. I'm sorry. I could have handled this better. You learn from it, change. But accountability does not require accepting accusations that aren't true. You can say, I'm sorry how I handled my part in this, but I will not accept total and complete responsibility for everything that happened. I'm not completely at fault for all of it. That is wisdom, maturity, understanding, and clarity. Stop trying to control the narrative. This is one of the hardest lessons of all. You can't control everything that happens, is told about you, or people perceive about you. Somebody may think you're selfish. Somebody may think you're cold. Somebody may believe that you destroyed the relationship. Somebody may hear only one side. You may never get the opportunity to explain yourself, and that is painful. But your healing cannot depend on receiving a unanimous verdict of innocence from everyone around you. Sometimes you have to know, I know what happened. I know my role in it. I could have done things better. I know why I made the decision I made, and I am moving forward. Time will reveal every pattern and every cycle. You don't always have to expose everybody. Patterns have a way of repeating themselves. Someone who consistently creates conflict eventually creates conflict somewhere else. Someone who manipulates eventually manipulates someone else. Someone who refuses accountability eventually has another situation requiring accountability. You do not necessarily have to spend your life proving who someone is. You just need to focus on yourself, who you're becoming, what you want to accomplish, where you want to go, and when you want to get there. Don't build your identity around being misunderstood. Here's another trap. You can become so focused on proving that you are not the villain that your entire identity becomes tied to what happened. Well, I'm this. Well, I did this. People say I'm that. Do not let that happen. You are much more than an accusation. You are much more than a label. You are much more than relationships, family conflict, or other people's opinions. You are not what other people say you are. Eventually, healing requires turning your attention away from those things. How do I make everybody understand what happened? Quit saying that. Quit thinking that. Quit believing that, because you're not going to be able to make them understand. And start thinking to yourself, what am I building now? Where do I want to go? What do I want to accomplish? What do I want to put in my life, and what do I want to remove from my life? And that is where freedom starts, true freedom. Sometimes being the villain means finally you choose yourself. Maybe you're the villain because you stopped accepting disrespect. Maybe you established boundaries. Maybe you stopped financing someone else's choices. Maybe you refused to participate in gossip, drama, and intrigue. Maybe you walked away from unhealthy relationships. Maybe you questioned and walked away from dysfunctional family patterns. Maybe because you stopped keeping everybody else's secrets. And finally, you said, I've had enough. It's over. It's done. I'm finished. I'm moving on. It's time to put it all to bed. That does not automatically make you right about everything. You're going to be wrong about some things. I'm wrong about things. But neither does somebody else's anger automatically make you wrong. So let's look at everything tonight. There are people out there that need you to be the villain because your boundary forces them to confront something that they don't want to confront, that is uncomfortable, that requires change, that requires accountability, that requires transparency, and either they are incapable or unwilling to accept that and recognize it and acknowledge it. Your departure may force them to ask why you left. Your silence may remove the argument they were accustomed to having. Your independence may remove control they once possessed. Your healing may challenge the story, the narrative that they told themselves about you. So practice and apply accountability. Own your mistakes and your choices. Apologize when you're wrong. Listen when someone tells that you have hurt them. Don't spend the rest of your life defending yourself against every person who chooses to misunderstand you. You don't need to become the hero in everybody else's story. You need to be healthy on your own. Mentally healthy, emotionally healthy, physically healthy, and financially healthy. Sometimes healing means accepting, I may be the villain in their version of the story, but I'm still going to move forward. Because your future is way too important to spend it arguing with people about your past. So, Here's tonight's dinner chat community question. Have you ever established a boundary, walked away, or finally stood up for yourself, and suddenly you became the bad guy or girl or the villain? Did you try to defend yourself, either verbally, emotionally, or hopefully not physically? Did people finally understand or eventually understand? Or did you finally decide to stop explaining? How much energy should we spend on correcting someone else's false version of ourselves before we simply just cut them all off and move forward? So please share your thoughts in the community below. Let's keep our conversations respectful and decent and honest, because every conflict has different perspectives. Everybody has different feelings and emotions based on their experiences, their education, their lives. So accountability should always work as a two-way street. So Midwest Survivor, remember, sometimes you have to be the villain, but sometimes being the villain can be the greatest role of your life, because it allows you to reflect, regroup, reorganize, and rebuild. So remember, how do I always leave you? Get healthy, be healthy, stay healthy, get strong, be strong, stay strong. I'll see you tomorrow morning for Breakfast Bits. And remember, we are going to quit just surviving, and we're going to start thriving. Take care. Have a good evening.